First of all, we're not afraid to discount. That's the main tactic that we use we call it an irresistible offer.
Love that.
And a lot of people in our industry are afraid of using irresistible offers. A lot of the consultants, which I always laugh when I think about these consultants that to me, they're like college professors that maybe did the thing that they're teaching about like 20 years ago, but they have no idea how to actually be boots on the ground in our industry today. Um, they caution people on stage all the time, never discount your product, and obviously like you and I have a little bit different vantage point being more in the trenches in this industry. It's a law of economics. Like if you took microeconomics on the first day, you learned about the law of demand. Law of demand is the lower the price, the higher the quantity demanded.
All right. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the podcast. Today, we have a little bit of a unique episode for you. So more often than not, my guests on this show are marketers and consultants or people who are building tools and resources to enhance patient acquisition. But today, we're going to break that mold a little bit, and I'm going to be interviewing a gentleman who sits on kind of a different side of the table. You may not know his name yet, but he's someone that I think you should get to know, and that's why I've invited him on the show. My guest today is Mr. John Wheeler. He is CEO of the Sacramento-based multi-location medical spa brand Esthetics Center. Welcome, John. Thank you so much for joining us.
Absolutely, Max. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, man. I'm excited about our conversation today. And just to give everyone a little bit of context, John and I met actually really recently at VCS, the Vegas Cosmetic Surgery Show. And we shared the stage there as presenters, and also we sat on a panel together during a session on marketing and practice management. And I thoroughly enjoyed the presentation that John gave. And later in this interview, I'm going to unpack exactly what I thought was so special about it. But first, John, would you mind just telling us a little bit about yourself, how you got involved in aesthetics, and what you and your team are building at Esthetics Center today?
Absolutely. So kind of a weird background, especially in this industry, but I was a pastor for about 7 years. And at the tail end of that time, I actually went to seminary in Michigan and went straight away after my wedding, and I applied for all these different jobs and I couldn't find work anywhere. And so I thought to myself, hey, I just got married. I love music. I was always like the sound guy in the bands that I was in growing up. And so I was like, I'm just going to be a wedding DJ. That makes sense to me. I love to speak in public. I love music. I love like putting a set together. So that's what I did. Started a wedding company, ended up growing it, selling it. My father-in-law is a plastic surgeon. We moved back to California, and he called me a couple months after we got back, and he said, hey, I want you to do for this company I'm starting exactly what you did for your wedding company. And so that's kind of where it was born. And I started out as the guy that posted on social media for our company. But for me, I've always been kind of a big vision, big picture leader kind of guy. And so it just ended up morphing from there. He had an office manager, quote unquote office manager at the time. And I had a bigger vision for the company than she did. And so it just ended up morphing into where I took over the business. And now a couple of years later, him and I are business partners. And we own at this point, very soon, 3 locations together in the medical spa, facial plastic surgery space.
That's really cool. I knew part of that from your introduction when you spoke at VCS, but I learned more just now. And I think both the pastor aspect and the DJ aspect make a lot of sense to me because you had an excellent presence on stage. You seemed really comfortable. Yeah. You really engaged the audience. Yeah, very much.
And
so.
there was a lot of weddings where I worked both as the officiant and the DJ, and that was always a weird experience to go from
double
pastor
dipping
to party guy.
Dude, I love that. Yeah, it's cool you mentioned being the sound guy. I wasn't so much the sound guy in bands that I grew up in. Actually, one of my business partners, who is our chief design officer, is like a legendary sound design or sound engineer and producer and musician as well. He's really great. But I learned just enough doing music and being in a band with him back in the day that's kind of how I was comfortable around starting a podcast, and I helped some of our clients do podcasting, and I know enough about audio to be dangerous. So
That's
that's
awesome.
cool. But I also love, just by the way, only in today's day and age can the person who's responsible for social media rise to become the CEO, just because like digital is such an important piece of a business today. And so I think that's really cool. I think that speaks
Yeah.
volumes too, just based on because the reason I invited you and was so excited to ask you to come on the show so I could pick your brain was I think your take on it was really refreshing from what I see a lot of medical spas doing or surgery practices doing. So I
Well,
think that's
the
pretty epic that you
muscle
came
that
from
you
there.
work in marketing is a similar muscle to what I work now as CEO, which is how are we
Mm-hmm.
going to build this brand? How are we going to grow this company? And obviously, as CEO, it involves marketing and branding and growing the brand. It also involves growing other things like the team, the people, the locations, the offerings, and just casting the vision. But it's almost that same muscle, like I said, of like, can you cast a vision? Can you see the future and bring it into the present? And I learned that in the marketing space.
That really, really resonates with me. Can you cast a vision? Can you see the present, the future, and bring it to the present? You're so right. Marketers have to be able to deal in like kind of the ethereal, imaginary, and some people need to do something a little more hands-on. So you're right. It is pretty similar, actually. I didn't peg it that exact way, but that's cool. Okay, so look, as I mentioned that kind of earlier, I really enjoyed the presentation you gave. I think it was one of the most kind of valuable presentations I've seen at a conference in this industry.
Thank you.
And yeah, no, I really mean that. And you said something when you first got on stage that I think was important. You said you didn't have anything to sell the audience. Now, I'm not saying this is always the case, but I often do see marketing companies pitching things that they know how to do or that are easy to scale, or telling practice owners that they have to outsource all their marketing, or things that may not always be really in the best interest of the practice. And as a marketing agency, I really try to discipline myself or to test ourselves to not do that, to always just figure out what really should practices be doing, and can we either offer that, or should they be trying to figure that out in-house versus me trying to sell them that. And this whole show is about marketing strategy. So I'd prefer to talk about what practices should be doing. And then from there, they can figure out the best way to implement it, whatever makes the most sense for them. So I thought that was really refreshing with the presentation you gave. And that's why I was really excited to pick your brain today. And so let's jump in. Will you walk us through some of the kind of trial and error that you went through in working out how best to market Aesthetics Center to get those first patients in the door, and kind of how you arrived at the formulas that you're using today?
Absolutely. So, the basis of our company, from a branding marketing standpoint, is a book by Donald Miller. I'm not sure if you're familiar with him, but he wrote a book several years ago called "Building a Story Brand." To me, it's required reading if you're in the marketing space, and especially in the plastic surgery medical spa industry, where every doc, every nurse, every surgeon wants to be the man, right? Like Dr. So and so, doctor of this city, or I want to build a brand around myself. And for me, I mean, it's easy for me because I'm not a doctor, right? So, but I never had that temptation to be like, I want to build a brand around X. I always wanted to build a empire. And it's
Mm.
really hard to build an empire around one person. So that was kind of the starting point. But that building a story brand, inviting your patients into a narrative. What's the narrative that our brand is telling and selling? And it's this idea around your customer is the hero and you are the guide. And so that for me took plastic surgery and flipped it on its head, where everywhere I looked in the landscape of our industry, it was the plastic surgeon is the hero and the customer is not the hero. They're not the guide, but they're just a person that needs a hero. But we all want to be the hero of our own story, right? I don't want a plastic surgeon to be the hero of my story. So just from day one, that was the DNA and the ethos that we adopted from that book. And again, it's required reading. If you're on my team in marketing, it is required reading. So that's really the foundation for us. And then from there, obviously, we built our website around that, our brand around that, our tagline around that, and but also just not settling for crappy content or crappy creative. Like we wanted best in class graphic design. best in class, everything. And so for me, with the last website that we made, we redid our website. That was like a year and a half process. Literally, it took 18 months to recreate our website because we had to start from scratch and build a new logo. We went through three logos that we actually launched and then took back and then launched. Like it was this crazy, like Steve Jobs Apple II experience where it's just like launching, no, not good enough, rebuilding, and it just took forever. Not that I would recommend that.
Yeah, I've seen rebrands and web build outs go for a long time. I've seen some come together fast that are epic, but obviously the point is the care that you're putting into building that narrative and that story brand. I don't know if I'm familiar with that author. The book title sounds similar. I'm definitely familiar with the concept of sort of building that story brand or figuring out what your story is. What I think is so intriguing about the fact that you brought that up is I walked away from the presentation you gave thinking about a presentation that I gave virtually last year when there were no conferences that was about what aesthetic brands can learn from e-commerce brands, because we were in smack dab in the middle of the pandemic. Everyone was if you didn't already have an e-commerce store, you were trying to throw one up, sell some skincare products. I think that's the most basic way you could sort of emulate an e-commerce brand. There's a lot more that I've been, wanting to help brands implement for a long time, but depending on if they're insurance practices or what EMRs they're using, and I want to get into this with you a little bit later, the siloed data that makes it hard for them to do those things, has been just something that I've been kind of passionate about, watching this space and how it can get closer and closer to what e-commerce brands do. But a key thing that I'm hearing now when you're talking about this is also the successful e-commerce brands do the same thing. They build a story brand. It's rarely ever about a single person or a personal brand or a guru brand, and it's really common for doctors to go in that direction, and it makes sense. They've worked very hard to become authorities in their field, and there is an era where you looked to that doctor as the expert, and that was there was kind of the totem of all of their marketing, and it made a lot of sense. I don't think that goes away for everybody, but I think there's definitely a strategy here that's coming. We're seeing a little bit more, especially with medical aesthetics, non-surgical practices. And I think you're right. That's you put it really well when you said the patient needs to be the hero of the story.
Well, our practice is surgical. And at that conference that you're speaking about, I sat through so many presentations with doctors going up there saying, hey, I'm a few years from selling my practice. I look at the name of their practice. It's like Dr. Bob Stevenson Plastic Surgery. How, I mean, what's the ultimate goal of a business? Ultimate goal of a business, I'll argue, is to sell the business one day, right? That's your greatest offering, is the business. That's where you're going to make 10, 20, 50, $100 million, depending on the scale of the business. How much does Jason McGee want to buy Bob Stevenson, MD, plastic surgery? Like, there's just there's no marketability. So that was even the kind of starting point for me, because when I took over, our business was named after our plastic surgeon, and that was one of the first things that we changed.
I think that's also innovative thinking on your part. I actually had the same thought. I don't mean to keep saying I just had the same thought as you, but
great minds think alike.
When you were talking,
no shame in that.
I appreciate that. No, but when you were talking about the doctors building the brands up around themselves, it's actually something we've seen for a long time. That problem where when they're trying to figure out what they're going to do later in their career, they've now branded it around them. And I would say that there are some people who want to be the owner operators of their business forever, but it should still be occupiable by somebody else. It should be set. You should set it up so that it is sellable, and if it is, then I think you've really built out the right model. So it's still a goal to strive for. But we're seeing more and more practices start up today, even surgical, like you said, not just medical spas, that are going with a name that can be is transferable. So that's also interesting.
100%.
When you said something on your presentation, how you started out doing radio ads, is that something before? Like, what's the path before you sort of honed in on the digital patient acquisition strategies you have today? Were you trying all different channels, including traditional media and so forth?
Yeah. So when I first started, we had been our company, even though we kind of had multiple iterations, right? There was, but basically it's kind of confusing, but our plastic surgeon moved about 25 minutes down from where he was down the hill into a town called El Dorado Hills. And he had his previous practice for about 25 years. So while we're a new company, we're also an existing company. So I wanted to just clarify that before I say what I'm about to say. So he,
Mm-hmm.
for years, when I took over, had been advertising in like the local magazines that, the ones that they like distribute for free in every waiting in every business, the regional
Mm-hmm.
magazines. So he had been advertising in there. And typically when you advertise in there, all of the other like legacy advertising companies look through those magazines to see who they can call and try to get to advertise for them. So all the radio reps read those magazines with the idea of who can I call that might be dumb enough to advertise on the radio
So it's
or on
just lead
TV.
gen for them.
It's just lead gen. Yeah. So anyway, we kind of got roped into one of those situations where it was like, hey, for $10,000 a month, you get this many spots on the radio, you get an endorsement deal from our morning show DJ host, and she'll come in as a patient, you can video it, she'll talk about it on air. And so that was our experience with radio. We went all in on radio. We were doing two separate stations, and we had an endorsement deal with the morning show host on both stations, two of the
Okay.
biggest in Sacramento. And it was just crickets. Like we would get maybe 4 or 5 calls a month from the ads. And I mean, looking back, it was like, of course, like who listens to the radio in 2020 or 2021 or 2019, whenever we're doing it? Nobody. So that's why it just was such an easy strategy to get away from. I think it was just, I kind of got roped into like, we can be on the radio. So much of advertising
Right.
in legacy media is an ego trip. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like
Mm-hmm.
everybody wants to have their face on a billboard. Everybody wants to see their ad on TV. Everybody wants to hear their name on the radio. Like it's just, are you stroking your ego or are you marketing your company? Because if you're doing digital ads, which you and I are so passionate about, you might never see those ads. Like they're being served to people that are not you. I don't even have a Facebook. Obviously, we're all over Facebook, but I'm not personally on there other than just looking at our ad center. So when I advertise, when I spend 10,000 on Facebook ads, my ego is not being stroked in any way, but those ads are 1,000 times more effective, literally, than the radio. So it's just kind of, you got to get over yourself if you're actually going to market well. And I think people in the ad industry appeal to the ego as like we could put your face on every billboard in this town. You might get
Yeah,
two
no, that's
calls out
true.
of it, but
Right. Yeah, and if you're getting calls anyway from other places, and you can't really, and the attribution is sort of obscured, and you can't even really tell if it kind of came from the billboard. That's part of the trick too. So you feel good about it. You think it might be getting you something. You're not sure if you should cut it off because what if it is, bringing in business? And that's the beautiful thing about digital too is how much you can attribute dollar for dollar that what's coming in the door based on what you spend on digital. I think there are some
it's
places
measurable.
right.
It's changeable easily.
Yeah,
It's
on the fly.
way more targetable, things like that. I mean, when you're talking about radio ads, they come to you with like, hey, here's our demo. That's all. Like, yeah, 40 to 60-year-old female women love the station, but like that's all you get. You don't
It's
get the
yeah, it's
targetability that you and I get on social, on paid social.
100% true. I think there can be some uses for these traditional media channels, but I would say like you've got to be spending a lot on digital before you should even be thinking about it. Before you've sort of
Completely.
saturated all your options there, and then there are ways to do it, but it's not what
Yeah,
we focus on. There's very few practices that really should be saying I've kind of done everything I can do here, and I don't want to expand to more traditional media channels.
I do agree with you because I am saying this while I'm in talks with some billboard companies in our city
Sure.
to put our name up on 8 or 10 billboards all around. But again, that's because we're blowing the roof off on paid digital, and we only want the billboards to wag the dog's tail on digital. Like
Yeah.
that's the
Also, what's paying for
strategy.
the billboards?
What's that?
Probably the digital. What's paying for the billboards?
Yeah, exactly. Digital's paying for the billboards, and the billboards for us are just going to be branding. They're not going to be direct
Right.
call to action. That's kind of to me when you know you're putting your eggs in the wrong basket when you're putting up billboards or bus shelter ads or magazine ads where you're trying to make money from those ads, I guess, like
Yes,
directly
it's
from
the
those
difference
ads. Like,
between direct response marketing and branding or just general advertising. So when you're trying to do direct response marketing, you need someone to take action right now. That's the last place you should be putting your money. Once you've got that funnel down, then it makes a lot of sense to sort of secure your position, especially you got 2 and soon to be 3 locations in a localized area, and you can actually do a lot of damage with those billboards where you can get a lot of lift and brand recognition and retention, and then you're bringing those. You're just kind of affirming that loyalty and bringing those patients to come back for their treatments. Obviously, med spa is great repeat
so,
business, so
so
yeah,
that when they see our digital ads, they're like,
yeah,
oh, these are the guys that were on the billboard. They must be legit.
yep,
But the
yep. That
click, the call comes from the digital ad, not from the billboard.
yeah. Do you even bother putting tracking phone numbers on those billboards?
Um,
I've seen it go both ways. I've seen people just kind of know what they're doing, and then some people really try to measure it. But sometimes trying to
yeah,
measure it
we did
gets
that
you a
on the
little bit tripped up.
radio. We were
Yeah,
all about the tracking numbers.
yeah,
For the billboards, we're just going to use, I mean, we're so built out with our EMR and our call recording and the AI that goes into the call recording that we're just not really like the AI that records our calls can tell us what is mentioned in the call from a really high level, like the
that's
acquisition,
cool.
where the lead came from, what they're talking about. So to me, that kind of does
I'm
away
familiar
with
with
the
some
need for that
systems that
tracking
do that.
number. What's that?
Yeah, I think it's fascinating. I'm familiar with some systems that do that, and I think it's fascinating. There's this one in Los Angeles. There's this one personal injury attorney that literally just owns the billboards in the town, and they went from I just pay attention to this stuff. How are people doing tracking and so forth? They went from having a phone number to having a website to they don't even have a website on there. So they're looking at I guarantee you, they're looking at their increase in organic search in relation to their billboards. And that's just how they're
Interesting.
doing it. And they just know they're spending millions and millions a month, so they don't even care to try to track it anymore. They know that the lift is coming in.
And what's the expectation with your phone number on a billboard? Like somebody's going to remember it, and then 30 minutes later,
Right.
when they get to their destination, they're going to, you see these things
I well,
for
I,
2 seconds.
I think that's it. You hit the nail on the head. They know how people function today. They just go to their phone and they type in whatever they can remember about the brand name, and then they end up going through it through Google. So it makes a ton of sense. But yeah, so obviously I'm a big fan of digital, as you said. But there's a lot more to digital than just, hey, social ads or Google ads or just a lot of the surface level things people think about. And going back to your talk, you shared a couple things that I thought were key takeaways. You shared that kind of one of your biggest successes was the use of remarketing.
Hmm.
You also spoke about how you leverage automation. You talked about, these are just the takeaways I wrote down after our talk, after your presentation. You talked about offer-based campaigns, and then the use of SMS to re-engage those leads. And this is all kind of what I would refer to as funnel thinking. Like people sort of generally think of marketing as just talk to one big audience. But if you break it down and you talk to the right audience at the right time in the funnel, I think you can go so much further. And I rarely see it being done intelligently. Can you share with us just kind of some of the examples that you gave in your presentation of what a sort of a typical campaign looks like and how you utilize some of those things I just mentioned?
Absolutely. So, first of all, we're not afraid to discount. That's the main tactic that we use we call it an irresistible offer. And
Love that.
a lot of people in our industry are afraid of using irresistible offers. A lot of the consultants, which I always laugh when I think about these consultants that to me, they're like college professors that maybe did the thing that they're teaching about like 20 years ago, but they have no idea how to actually be boots on the ground in our industry today. Um, they caution people on stage all the time, never discount your product, and obviously like you and I have a little bit different vantage point being more in the trenches in this industry. It's a law of economics. Like if
Yep.
you took microeconomics on the first day, you learned about the law of demand. Law of demand is the lower the price, the higher the quantity demanded. That's an
Demand
economic
curve.
law.
That's right. Yep.
Exactly. So
Yeah.
we know based on economic laws that if I show a low price to an audience, there will be a high quantity demanded if I offer a discount. So now the question isn't, do I offer the discount or not? It's who do I offer the discount to? And if I'm good at targeting, obviously you and I are both targeting guys, like that's what digital marketing is mastering the offer and the targeting and the distribution, right? So um, if I'm good at targeting, I can show my offer to the right audience, not the Groupon audience. That's the problem with Groupon is the targeting, who it's targeting. I don't shop on Groupon. Our avatar sure as hell doesn't shop on Groupon. But if I show it to the right audience, I know that I'm going to get a high quantity demanded. And that's the law of demand. And it's like putting the freaking best bait in the world on a super stocked pond and going fishing, you know? The question isn't should you use bait or not? It's what pond are you fishing in?
So I love the way you're breaking this down, and this is one of the things that I was really excited to unpack with you because sometimes it's hard to get clients to buy in on having some kind of an upfront offer. Um, if you don't mind, I think I'm going to steal. It's so obvious. I never really use that as an example, though, to just say, hey, look, it's supply and demand. I get the term I remember from economics is elasticity, right? So the concept is if you bring the price down, the volume inside of the demand curve should actually be the same because the price will go down, demand will go up. So you actually can create the same total sales in essence. But you're just even talking about using it as a carrot up front. And we see this with software brands. You get a free trial or whatever. They kind of have to get you hooked. But you brought up a really key point, and you just said it now with fishing in the ponds, which is that just it's about how you target it. And again, this goes back to what I would consider funnel thinking. If you take this kind of spray and pray, which is the not very targeted, not very strategic marketing strategy, you're kind of hitting everyone, no matter who they are and where they might be in the buying cycle with the same message, then it's wasted. So your concept of taking that offer and bringing it to the right person, you told me something that you don't bother with any of these offers or anything on your own social media. That's really obvious when we talk about it, but I think a lot of practices, if they're doing some kind of an offer special, the first thing they think to do is rush to their social media and post it. And if you really want to think about, like you said, which ponds are you fishing in, those people are already in. So don't waste your free offer or your discounted offer or whatever you're going to be giving away or discounting on them. Use it to bring in new people into the door, right? That's kind of what you mean by fishing in the right ponds.
Exactly. And if you're a client, a patient at Aesthetic Center, after your first visit, you will probably never see another discount again. So when people are like, "Oh, but I don't want to be a Groupon brand. I don't want to get that type of people." I, you can think that. That's fine. But I'm telling you from years of experience that you got to get the right person in the door one time and then focus on retention. So, what type of experience are you giving them to come back again and again and again? How are you locking them in or even from a membership standpoint, from an experience standpoint? That, if you can understand that, you just got to get them in once, blow them away, then you'll have a client for life.
And what would you argue, or what would you say to a person who says, well, you've given them a discount and now they expect it? I think I know what your answer might be. You kind of just said it with the experience thing, but what would you say to someone who says, well, now they expect that and what if they ask for it again?
It's just
Has
not
anyone
true.
ever?
No,
Has anyone
it's
ever?
just not
Yeah.
true.
Yeah. Okay.
It's not
That's really the
true.
answer.
Like
Right.
it's just not a thing. Like when you're offering a high caliber your avatar person the right reason, like a discount type reason to come in once and try you, you're targeting people that are usually looking for an excuse to leave their current medical spa for some reason they're not happy. That's all it
That's a
is.
great way to
They're
great
not
way to
even
put it.
necessarily bargain hunters because again, if you're good at targeting, you're not targeting bargain hunters. You're targeting people that have a yearly income of typically $100,000 or more, right? That have interests. Like we're teasing out all of the ways that people are not bargain hunters. So then all of a sudden now we think that they see a deal once, they come in once, they're going to be bargain hunters, even though all the data around their demographic tells us that they're not going to be. We have their zip code, we have their interests, we have their income, we have everything about them reverse engineered. They just want an excuse to leave the med spa that they're at now because they're not happy. And I can tell you, every time I've ever asked any patient, hey, why are you here? I know it's your first time. Tell me why you're here. They all tell me the same thing. Because the place I was at before didn't listen. They didn't make me feel like I was valuable, like I was important. They just wanted to stick a needle in my face and get me out as quickly as possible. You learn
So
how to listen to
this
your
is huge.
client, and they're going to be
Yeah.
a client for life, whether you discount their subsequent services or not.
This is huge. So targeting, you said it a bunch, and I just want to unpack it a little bit more. So, because I was asking you, hey, when you do these kind of offer-based things, do you ever have a concern? I asked you after your presentation, we were chit-chatting. Do you ever have a concern about sort of what kind of patient that attracts? And, as a marketer, I was like, why don't I, you gave the best answer you could have given. You said, no, because I target it right. So you're not targeting people you're targeting people who have, theoretically the disposable income or the expendable income for this kind of thing. You're making sure to make sure they fit your avatar, like you said. That's your marketing persona that is really your target demographic. And I think that's what you hit on is so important, is that there's a lot of other reasons people are maybe in market for something, and it's not always about price, but they need something, especially in the paid social medium. They need something to motivate them and move them. Google's very different, and we can almost do a different episode on the differences between paid social and Google. But I think it's very different in that the person is expressing intent through their search, but you're almost always looking at a higher cost per acquisition. So if you want to get best bang for your buck, it really makes a lot of sense to spend time on paid social. But you're pulling them out of something else that they're doing in the middle of their day, and you need something that motivates them. You need something that, but I love how you put it, where it's like they're already looking for a reason to leave. Something has left them less than satisfied, and they're looking for a reason to jump. Or maybe they've been a considerer of aesthetic treatments for some time, and they're ready to take the plunge.
Exactly.
So, but you can also target people. So you can also exclude targeting of people who have already taken advantage of your services. That's another point about targeting, right? So you're taking these offers, and these people who are worried about cheapening their brands. First of all, we're not going after the Groupon demographic or the Groupon. It's not even a demographic. It's an avatar is a better way to put it, because it's just a bargain shopper. That could be across all different demographics, but it's a persona. It's a consumer trait. So you're avoiding that, and then you're avoiding showing the same offers back to other people who've already maybe redeemed those offers, and then you're creating an undeniable experience, and they want to just keep coming back. So but the first thing, like I mentioned the software brand earlier, you got to get them to come and try your product in the first place. What's going to motivate them to do that? Why should they trust you? Why should they care? Why should they make the move?
Exactly.
So I couldn't agree with you more.
Every SaaS product in the world that I've almost ever seen has a first month free for that reason, right? And yep. They aren't worried about, well, they're not going to want to pay for months 2 through N at full price. No, that's it. Like,
the thing about that strategy is, go ahead. Sorry, I cut you off.
No, go for it.
No, I was going to say you have to be accountable to your product, right? That comes back to what you said. You have to know that they're going to love it. If you are worried that they're not, then you have a different problem. Take the SaaS brand analogy, or the SaaS company. They have to be confident in their product. They have to have listened to what their consumers want and know that they're going to stick. So marketing is not going to solve that.
Exactly. So for us, I mean, I read a book a while ago. I believe this was from Blitzscaling by Reid Hoffman, where he says, I believe this could be a misattribution, but it's this idea that your margins are my opportunities. So I go to all these medical spa local meetings, but like, we can't charge less than $12 a unit for Botox. Let's all band together and not charge less than $12. And we charge $12 for routine, but they're like, let's not advertise anything less than 12. I'm like, first of all, that's illegal,
right?
For us all to band together and form this cartel. But second of all, you guys can all do that because that's my opportunity to get somebody in my door and then keep a client for life. So anyway, that's our strategy. It's worked really well. We built a business around it, and what I'll tell you is, our brand in our local area has gotten to the point where people just want an excuse to come to Esthetics Center. Like, we are quickly becoming the go-to place for medical spa treatments, and everybody wants a part of it. And they see, I mean, we literally have a monopoly, Max, on every single influencer in our area. It's an echo
Just
chamber.
organically.
Like we have them all on our team and we love them.
Right.
And
That's, yeah.
it's probably my favorite marketing initiative that we've ever done. We have 40 influencers that we work with, and we call them our extended family because they are at this point. I love them to death. And it's the greatest. If you were like, what's the greatest thing you've ever done for your brand? It would be that.
Okay, yeah, so you didn't unpack that strategy, and we probably don't have time to do it here on stage there, but I think all of that follows from the brand anyhow, right? Like the only influencer marketing I've ever seen work is when there is true brand loyalty between the brand and the influencer. Otherwise, it's just inauthentic. It doesn't pan out, I've noticed.
Yeah, I see a lot of companies use influencers as like a one-off.
Yeah.
For our influencers, we've had 30 to 40 influencers come through our office consistently every single month for the last 2 years.
That's awesome. Yeah,
So
the consistency is everything. Anytime I've ever worked in that strategy, it's like we work out a long-term relationship.
yeah, exactly. Exactly.
Yeah. But to me, it all, I was jumping on here to talk with you about what you talked about at VCS, which largely related to targeting. You started off telling me about this book and building the story brand. And I'm now seeing how it kind of comes together because like you said, you're building that brand around your local region, and then people are just looking for an excuse to jump. So then your targeting gives them that excuse, gives them that nudge, and the deal, it's what we call a buy now. It's something that they have to go, oh, let me just take advantage of it. And it's almost just psychologically important to give them something. They may not be deal hunters just because they want to take advantage. And I love that. It's an excuse to jump ship or to jump into whatever you're offering, and it's an excuse.
Exactly.
That's really great.
Exactly.
One of the things that kind of was the big takeaway from, I already brought it up earlier where I gave a talk a while ago about what med spas and aesthetic brands can learn from e-commerce brands. So I think practices today are really missing the mark when it comes to a lot of tactics that are so effective for what I would call a digitally native brand. E-commerce brand, software, we've been talking about both of those. They live online. Like automation, like remarketing, and the other tactics that we've been talking about here. I think there's a few reasons for that. And the first one, we talked about this a little bit in Vegas, is the siloed data in our industry. The second one we just talked about for a minute there, which was the being wary of offer-based marketing. And then I think the last reason, and tell me if you agree on all these, is that a lot of practices really kind of lack the resources or the drive or the skills to implement these types of systems that you developed. And I was going to kind of break down each of those with you, but we've already broken down offer-based. Do you have any thoughts you would share about kind of siloed data and how that makes it so hard to emulate some of these digitally native tactics that are so successful?
Yeah, I mean, like if you're a digital brand, let's say you're selling goods online, it's very easy to link your POS to your CRM. And that's kind of all you would need, right? Is a good payment method and a good CRM to keep track of maybe people that come to your page, fill out their information and they almost buy, but then they don't, they abandon their cart, or people that have purchased in the past.
And then you can target them with an email or an ad as soon as they
Right.
abandon the cart. All of this data, as soon as these 2 points start talking to each other, the possibilities are honestly like
exactly
limitless.
You can retarget and remarket to everybody who's ever bought from you or almost bought from you or whatever. But for us in the medical spa industry, we have these archaic EMRs that most of which were built in the 90s. Today, they're legacy software, and they weren't built for the demands of a digital brand, right? They weren't built to encompass or integrate with some of the best CRM and payment platforms available today. And like most of the EMRs that I see are a full stack of like a payment system, a charting system, and like a really crappy CRM.
Well, some of them are buying marketing companies and trying not to let other marketing companies even integrate and saying you have to use our marketing company, and that kind of stuff is like these walled gardens.
Exactly.
There's a little bit of an advantage because there's only so many EMRs, at least in plastics, that are really popular. So they kind of try to use that advantage. I personally don't see it working out for them in the long term. It's been proven in these digitally native fields that you need to have an open system.
Exactly.
and let
So
everything talk to everything.
maybe that, Max, would be helpful though, is if we define what a single source of truth is and why, if we're talking about information technology systems, that's the gold standard. So a single source of truth is basically where all of your data is housed in one place and everything that you use talks with that source. So like your payment systems and all of your financial reports talk and integrate with your medical records and your inbound calls and your digital ads and everything. Like all of your reports pull from the same place. So where this gets hard with digital marketing is most of the companies in our space that I see have a silo within their Facebook and Instagram and digital ads and their Google ads and all of the reporting from there. And you can't see when those leads actually become a patient from one report. Like you can see like, hey, they called and they booked, so I can move them in my pipeline on my CRM from, lead or opportunity to patient. But then I can't see what they actually did. All I see is that they became a patient. So it's impossible to track the ROI for, hey, maybe they became patient, but maybe they came in and got a lip flip, like 6 units of Botox. Maybe we made $50 from, or maybe they came in and they did $20,000 in cool sculpting. It's impossible to know how well your ads actually performed from an ROI standpoint. And so that's why this idea of a single source of truth is so important and why we're paying, a quarter to $500,000 when it's all said and done to build a single source of truth.
Yeah, I was going to ask you what you're doing to solve that problem. So you shared with me earlier that you're building a system. What made you decide to? There are some systems you can use. You have questions about HIPAA compliance if you're in a practice that's collecting insurance, but there are a lot of systems you could try to skate by on. But you've decided to build your own or customize. A
Yeah.
custom version. Yeah.
Yeah. And so just finding a way, it's amazing because in 2021, you don't need to be a coder to build a great product when it comes to a piece of software. You just have to be able to identify great products that integrate together. And we call that a tech stack. So you just have to be able to build a great tech stack, which involves ideally zero coding and just taking a deep dive into API integration and middleware and products that integrate one platform to another to build that single source of truth.
Cool. I could pick your brain on that forever. Probably, I almost want to ask you if you wouldn't mind coming back and we could talk about it once you've built that system. There are a lot of solutions. I think, even though I was just talking about some of the EMRs being walled gardens, many of them are getting better with this and more savvy with this. And,
Yeah,
there
I'm
are
curious to
ways
see
be
what
able to
Patient
see.
Now does now that they've acquired Crystal Clear and now that they've acquired RX Photo.
RX Photo is the other one. Yep.
I'm curious to see if they really develop like a 21st century worthy single source of truth. We'll see.
It's something I'm also watching really closely. I was just in Aspen at Cosmetic Boot Camp, and I was chatting with some of their team about it, and they were able to say some things. I could tell there's some stuff coming. I'm really curious to see, and I'm all for it. I think that we need to. My only hope is that they will also embrace other parts of the ecosystem. I think they need to have some interoperability, and I think we can't move in a direction of closing that off. Even if you maybe want to have some features that are only open to people who use your entire stack, if they're going to offer it from marketing company all the way through to EMR. But I think at the end of the day, like different pieces of that stack, when they're broken out and one company focuses on let's say marketing, another one focuses on CRM, another one focuses on EMR, you get better products in each category. And so they do need to be able to talk to each other. But clearly people know this is a problem and there's all kinds of motion in that direction. So I'm excited to see where it goes. If people have questions about what stack they should use, they can always reach out to us. We have recommendations. Depends on their workflows, depends on their budgets, depends on the EMRs that they're already locked into and how committed they are to those. Depends on so many things.
Yeah,
it's hard to probably talk about it here. But I don't want to take up too much more of your time. I appreciate you jumping here to chat with me today. Let's talk about kind of just one last point here. I want to talk about the trend of first-party data. This is obviously really huge right now, and it's one of the reasons that I think your strategy of building up your own lists, and again, that's the strategy. I'm not saying you took it from e-commerce, but that's the strategy we see in e-commerce. Going back to offer-based marketing, how many times have you been on a website and the little pop-up comes up and says, "Hey, take 10% off your first purchase you put in your email. They're building that list, and then and this is the other thing that a single source of truth can help you do, is effectively remarket to those people who haven't
Exactly.
yet taken action. That is really not happening in our industry, or hasn't been, I think, up until more recent times, and is still not happening. It's only happening at a fraction of what it could be. So I think it's so important to build lists, to have a single source of truth, and I think that's why your strategy is really wise. Can you share your thoughts on that, kind of
Yeah,
where you
on
see
list
things
building.
going as it relates to first
So,
party
so,
versus third party data?
so something that I feel like you and I have probably both read that we've never talked about. Are you a Brunson guy? Russell Brunson?
Of course, I know ClickFunnels. I have not really read a lot of his literature, though.
Okay. So those are two more books that I would consider required reading for any digital marketer. Like read those yesterday. Would be .com secrets, which is, you're talking about funnel thinking and building a funnel. .com secrets is really probably the like the Bible on funnel building and funnel hacking. And then Traffic Secrets is his newest book. And that's a lot of this thought around like traffic that you own and how to own more traffic. Um, so
Yes.
that would be a great starting point, I think, for anybody listening to this podcast would be reading those books. But beyond that, I'm happy to talk about any of this.
Awesome. Well, I know you're not a consultant for other practices, but I don't know if people ever have questions, if you're open to people picking your brain. I know maybe you won't give away all your trade secrets, all your
Yeah,
hard-won trade
absolutely.
secrets.
I'm always happy to chat. And I love this stuff. I love list building. I love just seeing. It's funny because I love the thought leaders in the marketing space, and I don't always see that translate into our industry. But I love like the Russell Brunsons and um, the Gary V's and the real down and dirty Ryan Dice of the world. And yeah, anyway,
No, I can tell you are, and I haven't read all the same books you have, but I'm also passionate about trying to get some more adoption of these types of strategies in our industry, and that's why I wanted to have you on, because I just knew we would nerd out. And even though this is not what you have, no vested interest in sharing this information with others, you're just passionate about it. So I really appreciate you sharing it. What were the two books again that people should read?
so .com secrets, traffic secrets. Those are the two books by Russell Brunson. Check out his another idea that he has that I love is this idea of value stacking and how you can use that in your digital marketing. You can see a talk that he gave in Miami at the 10X conference, and I feel like he it's the talk where he made like something crazy, like $10 million in 30 minutes, and he unpacks how he does that. Actually, in another book of his, Expert Secrets, but he's a thought leader in our industry for sure, and I love everything he puts out.
I'll have to dive more into it. I don't know why I never really went down that route. I think we've always been, from my partners and I that started our agency, we're always so focused on design first, and I think that's one of the reasons we really latched onto aesthetics, and aesthetics latched onto us, because there's a lot of industries where the look and feel of your website maybe doesn't really matter so much, but in aesthetics, I always say they judge you by your aesthetics and their first impressions. So people kind of came to us from design, and I think I was always a little put off by the look and feel of what I saw in a lot of the ClickFunnels stuff. But at the end of the day, these strategies work, and that's at the end of the day, like, you're not building websites, you're trying to bring in patients in the door, and the website is an aspect of that. It's an important piece of it.
It's funny you mentioned that because that's always the struggle I have with ClickFunnels is it's a little bit more robust from a branding standpoint. And so I completely feel your pain on that one. But yeah, it's I would love to do this again anytime, Max, and I always enjoy conversations together. And anything people need, they can find me on LinkedIn under John Wheeler. Check out our business Aesthetics Center on Instagram, aesthetics without the A. But I'm also happy if you have any
The
other questions
aesthetics,
for
yeah.
me, I'm happy to chat. We can sign off and say this was part one. We'll do part two down the road, invite
I
myself
honestly,
back on.
we could do a weekly podcast, dude. You're a wealth of information. There's definitely a vibe when you just kind of get going about something you're passionate about with marketing, and that's what I'm passionate about, and clearly you are too. So I appreciate it. But yeah, let's definitely bookmark a time to do it again, do chapter 2. But Thank you, John. Everyone, I hope you can see why I wanted to have John on the show. Like I said, he's a wealth of information, super passionate, super smart, really savvy. Next time I'll try to get even more secrets out of him. We'll have him back on the show soon. Thank you, John. Thank you, everyone, for listening. We'll catch you on the next episode.
Absolutely. Thanks, Max.